with no further ado, it's a great deal of pleasure that I introduce our first member of our symposium, Dr. Aubrey Crawford. Dr. Crawford has his Doctor of Education from Indiana University and specialized in the area of adult education. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Allegheny College. He is the pastor of the Methodist Church in New Palestine. Dr. Crawford.
Thank you, John. Friend. When John called and asked me if I would take part in the symposium, I could only say yes because of its nature. One can hardly fail to say something relevant to aging, since, as someone observed, the minute you're born, you're a goner. And we're all involved in this process of aging, so somewhere along the line, there should be something here that relates to it. We're all impressed by events that are going on in the world today that have happened in our lifetime. We're aware of the fact that every year more and still more people are being born, and that more and still more people are living longer every year, that we are becoming more productive each year. And I think all of us want to keep it that way, even though our success has been in some ways an embarrassment to us. The problems we face in this land are primarily the problems of success. Our success has required us to rethink the aging experience, that we might better understand this rather crucial stage of life. Crucial if for no other reason than it occupies the major portion of the time that most of us spend upon this planet. One interesting concept to emerge from our consideration of aging is the importance of lifelong learning. And I say importance because whenever I think of aging, I'm unable to forget experiences with older adults in state hospitals, in county farms, in nursing homes, and in big houses now all too silent, where a forgotten human being lives in quietness with his memory. In all of the cases of this type, we find a degree of bitterness or an emptiness that you can't help feeling should somehow have been avoided. Now, in contrast with the individuals of this type, we find a person like Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who retired from the Supreme Court at the age of 90. And when visited by President Roosevelt in 1932, he found the 92-year-old justice reading Plato, and when he asked why, the answer was, "Why, to improve my mind, Mr. President." And we think also of his appreciation of not only the intellectual things, but remarking to his friend Brandeis one day in the Supreme Court building at the age of 90, "Brandeis, when I see all of these pretty girls walking around here, I think to myself, oh, to be 80 again." Now, no one aspires to an old age of bitterness and loneliness and boredom. Who would not prefer to be able to meet the sunset years in the spirit of Justice Holmes, or of Edwin Markham, who on his 80th birthday wrote, "I am done with the years that were, I am quit. I am done with the dead and the old. They are minds worked out. I have delved in their pits. I have saved their grain of gold. Now I look to the future for wine and bread. I have bidden the past adieu. I laugh and lift hands to the years ahead. Come on, I am ready for you." But Wendell Holmes and Edwin Markham did not acquire these attitudes suddenly. Rather, those attitudes were characteristic. That is, they were part of their character, somehow driven into them years earlier. And perhaps this is why another successful older adult, when asked when a man should retire and how he should prepare for retirement, said, "There is no good time to retire, and the time to prepare for it is when you're 25. The poet Wordsworth is right. The child is the father of the man. But there are other reasons why we should all do serious business with the concept of lifelong learning. For while each of us are in the process of becoming every day and every hour of every day, it's the same with our world. For instance, Professor Mee at Indiana University noted that in 1929, the high point of our prosperity before the Great Depression, we had 47 million people working from a population of 123 million. Today, there are over 70 million working from a population of 190 million. He noted that there was a 44-hour work week in 1929 with a 72-cent hourly wage. Today, we have a 40-hour work week with a $2.41 hourly wage. The average income per week in 1929 was $32, and the per capita income was $682. Today, there's a $100 average for the week and $2,157 per capita for the year. There were 3 million businesses and a gross national product of $104 billion in 1929. Today, almost 5 million businesses and a gross national product of around $600 billion. Now, most of us have lived through all of this tremendous growth. We realize that these facts do not begin to tell the story of what has happened to our world, however. We've solved many problems, but we're still wrestling with a whole host of problems as we carry on the routine business of daily events. The point is, we're playing in a faster league than in 1930. There just is no comparison. Men here, I'm sure, will remember in 1930 that we debated then if anyone would ever run the 4-minute mile. Today, a man who can't run a 4-minute mile has a very slight chance of making the Olympic team. The same with the high jump. The men who could jump 6 feet were the stars back in the 30s. And whoever thought we'd go above this? Today, if these men came back and could jump this high, they'd be defeated by the run-of-the-mine today athlete who wouldn't even take off his warm-up togs to do it. And so it goes in area after area. Now, I think you'll agree with me that the man or woman who does not keep up with society and its progress year after year is not in with society. And if through continuing education they don't stay up with society and in with society, they are in danger of becoming alienated from society. This stems from the nature of man. Psychotherapists such as Carl Rogers tell us that we find a basic tendency in man toward maintenance and enhancement of himself. Man wants not simply to maintain himself, but to improve his condition and the conditions around him. Thus, to be happy, a man must be productive or at least feel that he is being productive. And so, President Kennedy was fond of the old Greek definition of happiness as the full use of one's powers in the pursuit of excellence. It's this kind of happiness that we seek, the triumphant feeling which comes from efficiently handling the job that's yours to do at the stage of life you're in. I still rejoice when I remember the excitement in a small boy's voice who was reporting to his mother that he had learned to ride a 2-wheel bicycle. And I remember hearing him saying, "Mother, I'm just so happy and proud of myself." Well, the tragedy is that we forget that wonderful feeling. Riding the bicycles of life become old stuff to us, and we're content to stay with the same old bicycle and ignore the new challenges. I think maybe here we've run into the premature disengagement that Dr. Leal was speaking of. And I remember that Justice Holmes, again at the age of 92, said that a man had earned the right to a little irresponsibility when he got this old, but the man's character came through, and it wasn't a half an hour until he'd be calling for one of his secretaries from Harvard, "Sonny, come on, let's go have some self-improvement." And they sat down with their Plato. So we're discovering that premature disengagement cannot be achieved in a dynamic society such as ours without doing violence to the personality. The person who grooves in and tries to hold the fort where he is will soon discover that life has passed him by. This is because, as any biologist will tell us, life is irritability. When a cell or a body or a mind can no longer be irritated, it's dead. Or as Bertrand Russell put it, most people would rather die than think, and many of them do. So we're saying that lifelong learning is essential for happiness, it's essential for productivity, and without some conscious program of learning, one's adult life will be less productive than it could have been and perhaps unnecessarily complicated. I believe we will all recognize that the concept of lifelong learning, sound though it be, is complicated by the prevailing notion that education terminates when a man or woman is deemed qualified to hold a respected and or desired job. Hopefully this attitude is changing, but not rapidly enough. I'm reminded of the governor who, hearing reports of horrible conditions in the state's mental hospitals, decided to take a tour and see for himself. And so he went through the hospital and encountered a group of patients, and at this point he forgot his business, I guess, and the politician in him came out, and he walked up to them and introduced himself as Governor Smith, and one of the patients said, oh, when I came here I thought I was Napoleon, but they soon knocked that out of me. We're told that the youth of today, to get a good job, must expect to be replaced at least twice in his working lifetime by automation. So if a youth has the delusion that his education is over, he will soon get that idea knocked out of his head. The number of adults engaged in a program of continuing education is fantastic compared with a decade ago. The research designed to measure the extent and effectiveness has somehow some discouraging notes in it. We're finding we're doing our best work in the area of the least need, and we're doing the poorest work in the area of greatest need. That is, with those with less than an 8th grade education, those over 55, and those from the lower socioeconomic strata. The fact of the expensiveness of adult education is encouraging, however, for not all of these programs are remedial programs or job training efforts. Millions of adults are engaged in enrichment programs in the humanities, arts, and sciences, and this is as it should be and must be if we're to maintain our freedom in a changing world. Important as productivity is, it's not the whole of life. Man does not live by bread alone. Can we imagine a world in which productivity is the sole aim in life? Of course we can. Life is more than productivity. We produce to an end, to the good life. And so culture must be advanced, for it is the cultural groups which yield the people of ability. Now, if we succeed in developing a mass culture, which, thanks to television and mass communication, we may well be on the way to doing, the free society that we have known and cherished may be in serious trouble. For the mass society, with its sameness of food, sameness of dress, ideas, opinions, this is a far cry from the land of the free, which nourished and sustained such diverse peoples we referred to it as the melting pot a few years ago. Quantitatively, our life has improved tremendously. But unless it improves qualitatively, we are in trouble. In short, we must have sufficient number of adults engaged in lifelong learning programs to ensure an increase in the quality of our culture as well as the quantity of our production. Now, mass culture has much in its favor. It's wonderful to realize more people go to concerts than basketball games. But we do not exactly determine the culture that we receive. This is, in a large measure, determined for us. So there's a choice open to adults, whether they want higher culture enough to support adult education or lifelong learning programs, attempting to evaluate the quality of life, to elevate the quality of life in the community. And by the same token, adult educators must decide whether they want to do only what society demands of them or whether they will also do what society should ask of them. Far too many people today are content with fair to poor performance in citizenship, as events in Selma, Alabama, and the widespread northern indifference to the plight of the Negro clearly shows. Failure to make enough of our people aware of the need to be good citizens and cultured human beings means the great society we seek may only become the mass society of the consumer. Today, the aging person, whether he's 20, 40, 60, or 80, must make learning a normal part of his daily experience. For a nation is at least the sum of its people, and in the final analysis, productivity, culture, happiness, goodness, freedom, and peace, all of these things are found. So we all look forward to longer life. If it's to be a good life in a good world, lifelong learning is an essential for the good citizen and for the happy citizen.
When you tell him 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes. Aubrey, you have given us much food for thought. I think you've set the stage for our next two presentations. certainly the challenges you've thrown out to us can only be achieved if we're successful in the two areas to come. And so the next person who will build on the foundation laid here will be Mr. Jerry Woollen, speaking on independent living. Mr. Woollen is the field representative for the Commission on Aging here in Indiana. He's a health education consultant for the State Board of Health, and he did his work in public health at Indiana University. Jerry?
Thank you, John. I'm going to build on Dr. Crawford's foundation. I hope that the house isn't smaller than the foundation. My subject is independent living, and this is a very difficult subject to talk about because it encompasses so many things. What do we mean when we use the term, and it is a term, independent living? Many people are going to have different viewpoints about what dependency means or what independence is. In a society such as ours, it's very improbable that any one of us or anyone could go through life without ever needing some help from someone else. So when do we say that a person is dependent? Do we say that they're dependent if along the way they receive some help? Where do we draw this line? I would hate to have to say, this is where the line is. Cross over this line, you become dependent. Because in order for us to determine when a person is dependent, we must know all their background. We have to know the sum total of all the experiences that have happened to them throughout life. And of course, we don't know the things that are going. We cannot possibly know the things that are going to happen to them after that point. So it'd be very difficult indeed to determine when dependency begins and when independence ends. Even then, if we did make a determination of this, we would be making this determination in view of our past experiences, and at the best, it would be just a personal opinion. In a way, I don't like to say this because you've all heard it too much, but I can't help but think about this every time I make these considerations. And that's this: it's there, but for the grace of God go I. And this is very true. If we were exposed to the same experiences as anyone else, chances are we would make the same steps along the way that they made. The Commission on Aging and the State Board of Health means, when they use the term independent living, making opportunities and a wide range of services available to an individual through which he can maintain the highest degree, I want to underline that word, degree, of independence possible. Now, of course, my presentation is going to have a health slant to it, necessarily so, since I'm employed by the Board of Health in my trainings in public health. I find it difficult, at any rate, to separate other areas of concern within the field of aging from health. For example, housing certainly, if inadequate, affects the health of any person, young or old. Recreation and the amount and kind of it used by an individual certainly affects his health. Employment, the income of an individual, his ability to pay for services certainly affects his health, and so on. I think it is important that we recognize these things in our considerations. What do we mean by making opportunities and a wide range of services available? We mean that we must educate people to the importance and value of positive health and convince them that they must participate in a personal health maintenance program throughout their life. We mean also that we must prevent, to the extent our knowledge will permit us, disease and disability. We mean that we must make adequate medical care, including both diagnosis and treatment, available to every individual. And last, but no less important, we must make rehabilitation and restorative services available. These are things I'm sure you recognize that do not apply to any one particular age group, but apply to all of us throughout life. And I think that this is nice in a way that we don't have to limit it to any one particular age group. All of this means that we must take a look at our community, our state, and our nation, and sometimes I even think in terms of other countries, and I think maybe we should, and find out what machinery is at work that creates dependency, what gaps exist in services, and get busy doing something about them. What are we doing in Indiana? Well, first of all, in the area of education, the Community Organization Committee of the Commission has divided the state into 6 regions that correspond to the regions used by a state welfare department. And we try to hold a regional educational conference in each of these regions. Now, we'll have 6 conferences coming up the latter part of April and in May. And I see many of you here that are on planning committees that plan those conferences. These are your conferences. You plan them to help you. These are an aid to you to go back to your communities and establish these programs that I described. What are some of these programs? Home care programs. Well, I'm sure most of you have heard the term home care. What do we mean by home care? We mean a nurse going into the home of an individual and providing some limited nursing services that can be provided in the home outside the hospital under the direction of a physician. Homemaker services. Homemaker services are popular programs today, and they're very needed service. Many times in connection with a homemaker service program, you'll find a trained social worker, and they'll help the homemaker determine what kind of services they should provide. The homemaker will not provide nursing service, but they will provide limited services, such as maybe they'll want to prepare a meal once a day while they're in the home. The elderly man in the home, his wife's in the hospital maybe, wouldn't take the time or doesn't really know how to prepare an adequate meal for himself. Or maybe he isn't completely able to care for himself and just cannot get up and prepare a meal. The nurse doesn't have time to prepare a meal. Meals on Wheels programs. In Indianapolis, Little Red Door operates a Meals on Wheels program for ex-cancer patients who return home. Once a day, they're taking a hot meal. And I'm told that they look forward more to the visit from the person bringing them the meal than from the meal itself, and derive more good from it, in fact. We've been involved in nursing home or health facilities licensure since the last legislature established the new Health Facilities Licensing Council. And I think that we've made some real strides in upgrading nursing home care as well as any other health facility where we're going to find older people. I know certainly that we can't please everyone. There are a goodly number of nursing home administrators and owners and philanthropic home people who are not real happy with us at this time, but this thing has been going on for years and years in Indiana as in other states, and I think that this new Health Facilities Licensing Council is a real step forward, and we'll see a raising of the quality of care provided in all types of institutions in Indiana. Senior citizen centers, and I see a good number of representatives from our senior centers and our Golden Age clubs here today, the directors and some of the people themselves. These provide a very real and needed service in the community, and they're a fairly easy program to start in comparison with other programs. One of the greatest needs that older people have is a need to feel wanted and needed by someone else, and a senior center can give them this feeling if it's handled in the proper fashion, if it has good leadership. Screening programs. In this state, we spend millions of dollars each year caring for tuberculosis patients, caring for them. We spend just a few $1,000s in prevention If we take a look at the statistics, we'll find that the greatest majority of our tuberculosis will fall in the older age group. Now, these are the grandparents that are holding the children on their laps. We need screening programs, more effective screening programs in our local communities to find these cases of tuberculosis and get them out of the community. It will save us millions of dollars each year. Dr. Alford has said that we can eradicate TB from our society now, just as we have typhoid. We may have 5 cases of typhoid in a year in Indiana. That's nothing to worry about. Diabetes, as age increases, we'll find a higher incidence of diabetes. Same thing with glaucoma. We need glaucoma screening clinics set up in communities to find these things. In short, we've got a lot of problems where they can be solved if we'll all work together to ensure that every individual the opportunity to live his life in the best possible health.
Wrong one. He caught me short. Thank you, Jerry. I was thinking of one other aspect of this as you were talking. It's just a little thing in the minds of many people, but may be so helpful. And that was what was attempted here in Muncie of the calling service. Some of you will be acquainted with this, wherein people agree to serve on a volunteer basis as callers within the community so that they can call, can be coordinated by some agency. They can call this particular individual once a day, the older person, to make sure that they're all right. It takes very little, yet this is a very important phase of this whole thing of independent living. And I think it has real merit. Well, certainly independent living is related to, and you touched upon, Jerry, the next area to be discussed, economic security. And this will be discussed by an individual who certainly should have some ideas and know what's going on with the older person as it applies to economic security. Miss Patricia Livers, who is the district manager of the Social Security office here in Muncie. She's been a staff assistant in Cleveland with the Social Security offices there. She did her work at Indiana State University and St. Joseph Junior College. She does have one other role that not too many people, I think, know about because at the moment we're not too well known, but Pat is the president of our Delaware County Committee on Aging. So it's a privilege to introduce Pat Livers.
Thank you, John. And if I could deviate just a little bit from the program, I'd like to say that it's reassuring to see all this green out front on a day like today. I think it's especially appropriate. So welcome all of you Irishmen, even if your name is O'Schultz. I think this is very great. This idea of economic security is something that I don't know that this is peculiar to the process of aging. I think this is something that we deal with from the time that we start, if we start as a child on an allowance or on a part-time job. However, I think it becomes more critical as you approach or you reach the time of retirement, when economic security may mean living on a fixed income. Now, this fixed income is not necessarily a bad word, but it certainly can cause a lot of inconvenience without some planning, and perhaps without knowledge of the sources of income that are available. I don't mean to really peddle my own product here, but I hope to restrain myself and confine myself to facts. But a vital part of the economic security of 95% of our retired people is wound up in Social Security payments. either as retired workers or as dependents or survivors of insured workers. The most recent figures on personal income and Social Security payments in the United States, covering the years 1935 through 1962, show that of the total personal income, Social Security payments have risen from about 5.5% to about 7.1% in 1962. This is a rather significant increase, about 1/2 greater than it was before. Now really, this represents only a small part or a fraction of the financial security of retired people. I, of course, hope I know more about Social Security payments than the other kinds of income, but you have to remember this, that at the time Social Security started, there was also another very militant and aggressive movement in terms of retirement income, and that is the private pension plan, which is carried by many large employers and an increasing number of smaller employers. This represents a substantial income also to retired people. As a matter of fact, in 1964, about 24 million workers were covered not only by Social Security, but in addition by a plan covered independent of the federal program. The growth and the impact of Social Security benefits, I think, can be recognized by comparing average retirement payments in the years 1940, 1950, and as recent as September of 1964. Retirement payments to a retired worker under Social Security in 1940 was approximately $22.60 per month. In 1950, this figure had increased to $43.86, and in September 1964, the figure had risen to $77.53. So again, you can see a considerable amount of income, at least an increase in income. I think you have to remember that when we're talking about average figures, this also includes a substantial number of people who are receiving minimum benefits of $40 a month, as well as people who are receiving considerably more. Now, periodic increases in both the coverage of private pension plans and of Social Security has permitted the income to be expected in retirement to be a little bit more realistic than at the time of the inception of either of the programs. I think, again, if I seem to be dwelling on this one point, it's simply because it covers and affects so many people. There are a number of people who supplement or who have supplementary income from insurance, from savings, from investments, from veterans benefits, and a variety of other sources. Some people have incomes that they have planned for through annuity programs that, of course, may represent more than any of the other sources as far as retirement income is concerned. If I were to look in a crystal ball, and I guess St. Patrick's Day would be a good day to try to do this, and predict what the future would hold in terms of planning for retirement income, I think it's a little hazardous. But I think it would be safe to say that we can expect an expansion, perhaps an increase in the number of employers who carry on pension plans. We can expect some kinds of changes as far as the Social Security law itself is concerned. I think it would be also fair to assume that in 10 years, instead of quoting an average figure of $77.53 in our own payments, that this figure would be substantially higher as well, even without any legislative changes because of the increasing average wage base. Now, there's at the present time, as you may know, Social Security benefits are based on only the first $4,800 of earnings, so that we are really talking about only a part of the income. For example, for a single retired worker who has had maximum earnings, Social Security benefits replace approximately 32% of the maximum earnings. For a retired couple, Social Security benefits replace about 48% of the total earnings. But with a continuation in the growth of the program, financial security should be something that is attainable. Now, I've talked about some very, I guess, rather specific things, and actually what we're talking about is economic security and what will it do. 9 out of 10 people right now enjoy a form of income protection for retirement, for their retirement. These 9 out of 10 people also enjoy a form of protection in the event of disability or in the event of their death. This means that practically every working person has a prescribed protection in the law, in the federal law. This also means that every person has an opportunity for planning for his or her own economic security in retirement through participation in other sorts of savings and retirement programs. In Delaware County, for example, we have over 11,000 beneficiaries of one kind or another. We have over 6,000 people who are receiving retirement benefits only. This figure increases at a rate of about 7% per year. So that if you want to take these figures and multiply them by 7%, you will just about have what we will have here next year. To those 6,100 people, recent studies have shown, if we apply some national percentages, that well over 50% of these people are dependent upon their Social Security benefits as a sole source of income. They have some resources in homes and some resources in very limited savings, but for the day-to-day expenses, they are dependent upon Social Security benefits. Now, this tells somewhat of a tale as far as being able to buy new clothes, buy new appliances, buy a home, perhaps even participate in some of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of even health care. The economic security in retirement is something that I guess I haven't really offered you any plan. It's something I feel personally that every person should be very concerned about. At that age of 25, which isn't too early to start thinking about how much can I save and so on, it is a very real and very vital consideration when you are thinking in terms of cutting back an income from $400, $500 a month to an income of $200 or $250 a month at the present purchasing power. This is a problem that is facing many of our people. I guess I should have a joke to end this thing with, and I will not really tell you this as a joke, but there's a person of my acquaintance who reads the Bible quite often and usually turns to the pages at random to see if there is something of consolation, some message that she can get from this. And in one day when she was feeling particularly depressed, she opened the Bible, it fell open, and the first verse she saw was, "And Judas went out and hanged himself." And she felt not too consoled about this, so she closed the Bible and opened it again. This time her eye caught this verse, "Go thou and do likewise." And this still was not really what she had been searching for, so she closed the Bible again, and the third time she quit because her eyes scanned this verse, "Whatever thou doest, do quickly." So with that I shall leave.